What's up, guys? So if you have missed it from other videos, I don't actually know what order they're going in. This might actually be the first one that goes up, but if you did not know, I'm currently at Sundance Film Festival. I'm gonna be there for 2 weeks, so I figured I would get some videos out of the way that weren't like topic dependent, that weren't dependent on something going on right now. Just so I would have uploads ready to go because I don't know how busy I'm gonna be when I'm there. Based on the schedule we have, it is literally full days of watching movies from like 9 o'clock in the morning until midnight, so there might not actually be that much time for me to make other videos. So I just wanted to make sure there was content there for you, and I figured that since I'm going to Sundance Film Festival, it might be a good idea to look back on some of the movies that I watched in 2018, because I did go on a mad dash to watch a ton of movies that were released, or at least saw wide release, in 2018, and I figured that I might take some time to go through some of the lesser known ones and then just talk about, you know, like 10 of the lesser known ones that I ended up really enjoying and that I recommend you guys trying to check out if you can. So most of these are probably not going to be available on Netflix. There was one that I kind of like that I think I'm going to talk about that is on Netflix, and then I'm putting a couple on here that are a little bigger, that got wider release, that I would still recommend seeing. This isn't in any kind of particular order. I'm just going to talk about some stuff. So first up, one of the ones I saw was called The Rider, and if you had told me that one of my favorite movies of the year was going to be largely involving a, you know, country cowboy, rodeo boy, and horses, I would have called you crazy. It's directed by Chloe Zhao, and she basically tells the story of a guy who is a rising star in the rodeo circuit, and he ends up having a really severe accident, and the whole movie is basically just this juggling of him trying to pursue that passion and figure out what to do with his life when the thing that he loves doing most could kill him. And what I ended up finding really interesting about this after I looked into the movie is that all the people in the movie are based on themselves. Like, this is a story she's telling based on a real person named Brady, and he's the one acting in the movie, and just all the different characters are, you know, his family. And it's really, really heartwarming, and it's like there's a couple characters that when you find out they're acting, but they're themselves. They're not actually actors or actresses. It's really incredible, and I definitely think that it is worth the watch. It's currently sitting at a 3.9 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, and I thought it was great. And I think a lot of people can just, even if you have nothing in common with the story that's going on, I think a lot of people can resonate with the idea of pursuing passions and when you feel like you can't anymore, and what do you do when you feel that lost in life. So I would definitely recommend it. I think it might be available on Amazon and iTunes to rent, and to me, it's definitely worth it. Next up, we're gonna talk about Blind Spotting, which was directed by Carlos Lopez Estrada, and is basically about a black man who's dealing with his last 3 days of probation. He works with his friend who is white, and it's just probably one of the more real stories about race and racial differences and how different people are going to be viewed in different ways, so that even if you're born in certain communities and grew up in a certain way, the color of your skin can make a difference depending on what kind of situations you end up in. And it starts off, and it's got so many like high notes, really fun, genuine, just funny moments of people just living their lives, and then it gets very real. It gets very real and in your face, but it doesn't preach. It's just very real. That's the best way I can word it. And for all of these, I don't really want to go into too much of like any plot points or even stuff that they would provide in like a description about the movie. I just, you know, just the basic stuff, but it really just kind of has to do with how that friendship builds out and how you can see things from different people's walks of life. Honestly, one of the reviews I'm seeing here kind of uses a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird with Atticus Finch saying, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you can climb into his skin and walk around in it." And that's kind of what this film manages to achieve really well. So I would recommend it to everyone. I thought it was really well done. Again, I think this is available to rent on iTunes, so worth checking out. Next one we're going to talk about is Miseducation of Cameron Post, which I did make an entire video about after I saw it, and this one, it's pretty basic. It is about a gay conversion therapy camp and the problems that causes, and it's this is the movie that I'm kind of like frustrated about. It's directed by Desiree Akhavan, and I just see, or Akhavan, I don't know, I think it's Akhavan, but it's one of these things that it should probably be the one getting all of the Oscar buzz, not Boy Erased. So I think it's probably just because they didn't promote their Oscar run. I don't know if they decided to even do that, because you do kind of have to campaign for Oscars, but you know, I saw Boy Erased, and it has some really great moments in it, but I think overall as a film, it doesn't achieve as much as The Miseducation of Cameron Post does. And I think that they're both important movies to watch, but I would definitely give the nod to Miseducation of Cameron Post. Chloe Grace Moretz was fantastic in it. It's based off of a book. You should definitely check both or one or the other out. One of the things I really appreciate about it is that it does an incredible job just juggling the characters trying to find light and humor out of a situation that is just so ridiculous and painful and terrifying. Next up is another one I ended up doing a review for after I saw it, and that is Mid-90s. It's a fantastic little slice of life piece where it's just kind of the growing pains of you trying to figure out your place in the world, which I think a lot of people can resonate with. There was like a moment that was a little bit uncomfortable between him and an older girl, which I wasn't really a fan of, and it's probably something I would have left out of it, but I think it's definitely worth watching, especially if you were somebody who resonated with like skate culture or any kind of like alternative culture like that. Definitely worth watching. It was directed by Jonah Hill, so even just to see how Jonah Hill crafts together a movie in a directorial debut would definitely be worth checking out. So again, if you want to see kind of like a little bit more of a review and more opinions when I was fresh out of watching either of those two movies I just mentioned, I'll have them tagged somewheres up below with cards. Next up is a Korean film based off of a Japanese short story by Murakami. I can't remember his last name right now. Haruki Murakami, so it's based off a short story by him. And its Korean title is Byeoning, so if you can't find it under the title Burning, you might be able to find it somewheres with subtitles like to rent under the name Byeoning. But it is a very interesting movie involving a guy who runs into somebody that he used to go to school with, who is now kind of grown into being a beautiful woman, and you know, they're hanging out a lot, and then she asks him if he would just mind watching the apartment for a bit and feeding the cat. And he's, you know, kind of assuming that it's kind of building towards a relationship, so he does all that, but then when she comes back with a new friend who's played by Steven Yeun, and Steven Yeun's performance in this was fantastic. If you don't know who that is the guy who plays Glenn in The Walking Dead, and he's absolutely fantastic. Considering this is actually like a Korean language film, it was really interesting seeing him in it, and you just get pulled into this winding, crazy story where you don't know if what, you know, the main character thinks is real, or if he's kind of like making things up in his head, or if there's actually something wrong with this guy named Ben. And it was just very, very cool, very great watch. I don't know where you could find that right now, but I would 100% recommend watching it. It has a couple weird moments that would probably be unusual by kind of like North American standards, but very good, very trippy, and there's this really nice like theme centered around a greenhouse, which is really gonna leave people wondering. And that was directed by Lee Chang-dong, but again, based on a book by Haruki Murakami, who is a very, very prolific Japanese author who has tons of books, you know, printed here. I actually just started picking up a bunch of them after I saw this movie, so it's fantastic. Next up, we have another foreign film called The Guilty. I think this is a Danish film, but it's very low budget, but also very thrilling and really well executed. So it's basically about a police officer who's working on duty. He's basically working dispatch. You don't know why at first, but it'll get into it. But he ends up getting a call from somebody saying that she's been kidnapped by her boyfriend or her husband. And literally the entire film takes place from that police station. You never get scenes of where she is. You never get anything outside of what the main character, Asger, is experiencing. And honestly, for something that happens in one location, it does a great job immersing you in a way that it feels like there's a lot going on. It really wasn't until the end of the movie where I was like, absolutely everything in this movie happened from like 2 rooms in a police station, and all the dialogue was basically between him and somebody on a telephone. It's definitely something that I would recommend people checking out if you can track it down. It looks like it's available for rent on iTunes, so it's called The Guilty. I think the Danish title is Den Skildige. Don't judge me, I don't speak Danish, I'm sorry. Next up we got Thunder Road, story of a father just trying to keep his life together after his wife leaves him, and he has a daughter, and he's trying to keep his life together for her after his mom dies. And, you know, he's also a police officer, and just little things start happening. You can tell he's like always constantly on the brink of having like a mental breakdown. And then a lot of times does have those mental breakdowns. And it's just really interesting to see a movie that allows somebody who's, honestly, it's a man who's a police officer that is traditionally a position of power, being allowed to act out of turn like that, and being allowed to be very emotional. And I think it was really great. So it's directed and main acted by Jim Cummings, and it's like definitely something I would recommend checking out. It starts very, very wildly, but just kind of following him through his meltdown in this movie and how hard he's trying to keep things together for his child is like, it's very touching. Next one I decided to put on the list is Leave No Trace, which is a really interesting story about a father who has PTSD and is chosen to live off the land with his daughter, and they just barely make any kind of connection to the real world, and then something happens that, you know, they find out where they are, and there's just this kind of growing pain between the two of him feeling like he can't integrate with regular society, and her just not knowing her place. Her being in this position where she was fine with the way things were, but once she gets that taste for how things could be, and just like the community she could be involved in, and there's just that tension between the two, and it was like a really, really interesting movie, and I would certainly recommend watching it. It gets quite the high reviews. I think it's available for rent on Amazon and iTunes. I know it's been on like planes, so it might even be on Netflix now. It might be on Netflix. I don't know. I hope it's somewhere where you can watch it, because it was really, really good. It's directed by Deborah Granick. And I think the point it tries to drive home is that like your kids can and hopefully will be better than you, and that's okay. Then I'm gonna go ahead and toss First Reformed on the list. I think it originally saw some kind of release in 2017, but got wide release in 2018, so that's why I have it on the list. Directed by Paul Schrader, starring Ethan Hawke, and Amanda Seyfried's in it too. It's basically about a pastor who starts kind of losing touch with what he thought his fundamental values were after he has a like just weird encounter, or just kind of like a life-changing encounter with a guy who was like a very extreme environmentalist, like one of the people who are like, yep, the world is falling apart and I can't mentally handle the fact that all of these things are coming quickly and the world is getting destroyed. I think how some of us get a lot of the time, sometimes you read certain headlines and you're like, wow, we might all die tomorrow. But, and it's just, it was a really, it gets kind of weird towards the end. Like there's a couple scenes at the end that kind of just really take it in an odd direction. But overall, really good movie, very, very impactful, and just had like really good character dynamic and really good depth of characters, and watching this kind of like transition through Ethan Hawke's character. Now, one of the ones I really wanted to recommend because it's super trippy and just really interesting, and a lot of people are gonna hate it, but I almost want to make an entire video about it once it gets closer, but it got delayed for wide release, so it's been available, and it's called Under the Silver Lake, and it stars Andrew Garfield, and it's directed by the guy who directed It Follows, David Robert Mitchell, and it's just this like crazy trippy story with a bunch of conspiracies that are ultimately just leading to the fact of like, why are you spending so much time getting caught in this next question when you're just avoiding living your actual life. And I thought it was really, really great. It's definitely something I want to make a full video on. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. A lot of people are going to hate this movie, but I appreciate any kind of movie that leaves you thinking after the fact, and this is definitely one of them. So I want to at least mention it because it would have been on the list if it was getting wide release, if it had gotten wide release for the end of 2018, but I think it got delayed till April. Then just a couple of other ones that are really a lot bigger. They got significant wide release was Searching, which was a Sundance movie from last year, and it took the whole idea of screen capture movie to the next level. So you got like your unfriended dark webs, where it's like everything that you're seeing is through basically what if it was like looking at a computer screen, and it takes it to the next level. So Searching is the story of a man trying to find his daughter and realizing that maybe he didn't know as much about her as he thought he did, and just learning how to open up more after the tragic loss of his wife. That is gonna do it for today's video. If there's some other movies that you guys thought were a little bit off the beaten path that you really enjoyed, feel free to list them down below. Again, this is not supposed to be the best 10 movies of 2018. This was just more supposed to be movies that might not have seen wide release, movies that you probably haven't heard of, or like there's a chance you haven't heard of them, that I would recommend at least checking out. It's not supposed to be a best of 2018, it's just supposed to be like top 10 recommended movies you might not have heard of from 2018. And if you're real fancy, obviously there's a bunch of like, there's so many movies that I saw that I would recommend seeing last year. So check out my Letterboxd account for my 2018 list. And I would honestly say pretty much anything under the 60 spot is worth checking out. 60 or 70 spot is probably worth checking out, honestly, because I saw like 135 movies so far from last year. So I would say at least half of them are worth checking out. So thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.